Oh, classic Zoom moment where the PowerPoint appears to have disappeared. It always works 5 minutes beforehand, and then let's try this. Could you give me a thumbs up if that looks right? Great. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me for a moment there. So, as I said, we're here to talk about the public consultation on the Devon Climate Emergency Partnership's response to the Devon Climate Assembly, and the consultation is now live and it's running until the 14th of April. So tonight we're going to talk to you about the Devon Climate Emergency Partnership, how it came about, the carbon plan process so far, where we've got to with developing the interim Devon carbon plan, and then how the Citizens Assembly fits into the development of the Devon carbon plan, before moving on to introducing the Devon Climate Emergency Partnership's response to the recommendations of the Assembly, and how you can have your say and keep up to date with the partnership. And then after that, as I said at the beginning, we will have a chance to answer some of your questions, so do pop them in the chat. So the Devon Climate Emergency Partnership are 29 organisations that are working together to create a resilient net zero carbon Devon where people and nature thrive. You can see the organisations on the right there that are involved in the partnership. It includes all of the local authorities in Devon, including Torbay and Plymouth, as well as some of the utility companies, environmental organisations, emergency response, and so on. So it's a really broad coalition. And collectively, the partnership's working to reduce carbon emissions to net zero by 2050 at the latest, and improve the resilience of Devon's environment to climate change, and prepare communities for a warmer world, because we know that we're locked into a certain level of climate change. So far, there was an evidence gathering phase back in 2019 to the beginning of 2020, where anyone could submit ideas online for how we achieve net zero. There's a youth parliament event and a series of thematic hearings, which are essentially roundtable events of bringing expertise together around things like energy, transport, food, land and sea, and so on. So that evidence gathering phase was processed and fed into the drafting of the interim Devon carbon plan by the net zero task force that was appointed to advise the partnership on the development of the Devon carbon plan. But the evidence gathering phase also threw up a number of more challenging, controversial issues that we felt required further public deliberation, and those were earmarked within the interim Devon carbon plan for going to a citizens' assembly. The Citizens Assembly ended up being online in the end because of the pandemic, and then the Assembly produced a report, and we're now at the stage of having a public consultation on responding to the recommendations of the Climate Assembly. So once we've finalised our response to the Climate Assembly, that will allow us to complete the Devon carbon plan by implementing the changes to it that we're proposing in response to the Assembly, and we hope to be able to finalise and adopt the Devon carbon plan this summer in August. So the interim Devon carbon plan sets out a framework of how Devon can get to net zero by 2020. What needs to be done to overcome barriers to achieving net zero, and highlighting the opportunities as well as the co-benefits, such as for health, of pursuing net zero. It's a plan for everyone in Devon. It's not just a plan for the partner organisations, and the plan's also really clear that we can't achieve net zero with existing resources and policy. We're going to have to gain some more resources and updates in policy nationally. And most actions do need more resources and funding, but we do signpost that actually there are opportunities for organisations and individuals to redirect some of their existing spend. So the plan is broken down into, it covers cross-cutting themes, the economy, energy, built environment, transport, and food, land and sea. So I'm going to hand over now to Catherine, who's going to talk you through the Citizens' Assembly. Catherine, are you there, or has your Devon internet connection lost you? It sounds possible that she's been lost in the ether. I'll carry on for a moment, and then when Catherine's internet connection picks up. So the Citizens' Assembly, there was a 70-strong panel of Devon residents who were invited as a representative sample to take part in the Assembly. And that was the result of sending out 14,000 invites across Devon to ensure that the people that we got in the room were truly representative of the population of Devon. And the University of Exeter advised on the process, and we went out to tender and appointed the Involve Foundation to facilitate the Assembly for us. And the Assembly met online for a total of 25 hours during June and July in 2021. And actually, holding an Assembly online worked really well in the end. So members engaged in learning, dialogue, and deliberation about the causes of climate change, and also about the specific topics that we were asking them to give input on. And so what we asked them to focus on were, how could we encourage people to reduce car use? How should we encourage people to retrofit buildings? And what should the role of onshore wind energy be in Devon? So here's a screenshot of just some of the Assembly members taking part. So there was a really good atmosphere online, and it seemed that people got a lot out of it. So the Assembly proposed a series of resolutions for each challenge, and conditions attached to those resolutions saying, how should we implement the changes that they wanted to see. And you can read the full report online, but generally they told us, as well as telling us specifically about the topics that we asked them to explore, they gave us some general messages as well, which were that we need to communicate and inform the public, involve communities, act with the appropriate urgency, show ambition, demonstrate leadership, be accountable, and work with central government. Catherine, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Sorry about that. I've had to go away and come back. Would you like me to take over?
Hear you, so
okay.
I'm going to carry on for the moment. So the headlines from the Assembly, and this is strongly paraphrasing, but were that with regards to energy, there was strong support for onshore wind, particularly when controlled locally, and the benefits were able to be retained by communities. And for transport, there was a strong level of support for electrification of vehicles, some support for congestion charging, but actually little support for increasing car park charging or workplace parking levies. And they're really clear that they'd like to see sustainable alternatives to car travel in place first. Building retrofit, there was some support for using regulation to require people to upgrade their homes, specifically support for doing so through the planning system and through linking council tax and business rates to building energy performance. So, responding to the Assembly, the partnership received the report on the recommendations of the Devon Climate Assembly in September last year, and then worked with the officers and organisational representation in the partnership to draft some actions from the partnership responding to those recommendations. Then there was an opportunity for local authorities to consult with their members on the potential actions. Some updates were made following that. And then the working groups of the Devon Climate Emergency Partnership, the tactical group and the response group, signed off the actions for consultation. And now the consultation is live. As I said, it's running till the 14th of April. And then following the consultation, we'll spend about a month processing the consultation responses and then some time making any amendments that are required and incorporating them into the interim Devon Carbon Plan to make it a final Devon Carbon Plan, and hopefully we can get the final Devon Carbon Plan adopted in August this year. So this is not the full response from the partnership to the Citizens Assembly recommendation. I just wanted to give you a flavour tonight of our response so that you can then hopefully go online and dig into the detail a bit more. So for onshore wind, the partnership's response to the Assembly says that we should work with government to make it easier for onshore wind projects to get planning permission. We should identify potential locations for renewable energy and look to allocate these in local plans. It proposes that we provide practical support for communities wishing to develop their own renewable energy projects and provide high quality, objective information and education for communities about the climate emergency and the need for renewable energy. It also proposes that local plans should look to include policies that give weight to community-owned renewable energy, and also that assessments of Devon's renewable energy resources should be updated to include onshore wind. So on the topic of transport, the partnership's response to the Assembly proposes that we provide regular, affordable and integrated alternatives to private car use in combination with measures to make car use less attractive, that we ensure that our streets are safe for all and that public transport is efficient and affordable, that we modernise and create car parks at strategic points to encourage car sharing and onward journeys by active travel or public transport, and that we recognise in the final carbon plan that significant progress should be made on active travel and public transport routes before proposals to discourage car use are introduced. It also proposes that we should encourage employers to make commuting by public transport and active travel more attractive, and also investigate the concept of a tourist levy to encourage the tourism sector to think about how visitors can help contribute to net zero, because that was something that the Assembly was really interested in. It also proposes that we review the potential for congestion charges and low emission zones in appropriate areas of Devon, but giving consideration to local impacts and likely effectiveness. So moving on to building retrofit. The Devon Climate Emergency Partnership is proposing that we explore opportunities to enhance financial support available for people to retrofit their properties, but also work with government to explore additional mechanisms to require energy efficiency upgrades, and work with government to enhance the availability and awareness of green mortgages, as well as working with government to continue exploring the use of council tax and business rates to encourage energy efficiency upgrades, which is one of the things that the Assembly heard about and how that had already begun to be investigated in some parts of Devon. So we're also proposing that the Devon Carbon Plan will recognise that a just and affordable transition is required to ensure that vulnerable and low-income segments of society and rural communities are not disadvantaged. It also proposes establishing a Devon-wide energy advice service that would link homeowners, landlords and tenants with DIY guidance, independent assessors, skilled installers and market offers. This was something that was outlined in the Interim Devon Carbon Plan, but the Assembly wanted the inclusion of DIY guidance in this as well. So we've taken that on board. And the Devon Carbon Plan will also monitor the amount of public money spent on both domestic and commercial retrofitting in Devon. And we're also proposing to evaluate the opportunity to use planning conditions to require energy advice upgrades at the time of extending a house, which was another thing that the Assembly heard about in quite a lot of detail. So we'd love it if you had your say on our response to the Assembly and told us what you thought of it. You can read in more detail about our response on our website on the page. You can get to it from our homepage at the top or along the top of the menu under the tab consultation. And you can see that this page sets out what's the consultation about, what was the Devon Climate Assembly, how does it relate to the Devon Carbon Plan, and then goes through our proposed responses in more detail, and then tells you how to respond to our proposals. So here's just an example of how we set out our responses to the Assembly in more detail. So you can see at the top of the table there, the Assembly resolution, condition or supporting recommendation. We tell you what percentage of the Assembly supported it. So onshore wind resolution 1 was supported by 89% of members. And then we explain what's already in the Interim Devon Carbon Plan, if anything, about this, and what's our proposed response. So you can answer one of 2 questionnaires to tell us how well you think we've done in our response to the Devon Climate Assembly. The shorter version will take you 15 minutes, and it's shorter because it's only asking you about our response to the main resolutions that the Assembly set out. But the full length version will take you up to 45 minutes if you answer every question, and that will go through our responses both to the Climate Assembly's resolutions, but also those conditions that they attached to each of the resolutions and how they should be implemented. You're not obliged to answer every question, so it will take you less time, for instance, if you only answer the questions about onshore wind. So, Catherine, if you're there, you can come back in if your internet's picked up, or I'll carry on.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Brilliant. Okay, so we wanted to make this as available to as many people as possible. So you can go online. Also, you can go to the library where we have all the hard copies of all the documents that you need, which you can also find online. You can use the free internet computers at the library, or if necessary, so maybe if you know someone who's shielding or someone who's not particularly tech savvy, you can also email on their behalf, and we will send them out a hard copy which they can fill in with a free post envelope so they can return it back, or you can simply pass over our phone number that's here on the slide so that they may ring in and request one for themselves. Right, so next we're going to go over to Emily, and Emily going to have some questions for us. But in the interim, if you want to keep up to date with all the action and everything that's going on, sign up to our newsletter, and you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever your social media of choice is. And also, don't forget to have a look at our website. There is some amazing information and tips there, whether you're part of just a community, an organisation, or you just want some individual tips on how you might start to live in a slightly lower carbon way. Lots of information there. It's worth having a look. Emily, if I could go to you and see what questions we've had come in. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. That's great. Just a couple of questions in the chat. I'll just do them in chronological order because I think that's easiest. The first question is about the proposals for onshore wind. This person is asking that will our proposals enable them to install a wind turbine on their property? So I think this question is kind of more widely about what the onshore wind proposals mean for individuals looking to undertake onshore wind projects. Oh.
Emily, I can't hear you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Got some tech gremlins now, haven't we? So the proposals on onshore wind mostly focused on commercial scale onshore wind rather than domestic onshore wind, such as a turbine that you might install on your own property. So there remain some quite significant barriers to onshore wind, which is what our proposals are trying to overcome, particularly through working with government around changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, in particular that niggly footnote 54, which is a large obstacle because it requires absolute community support from every single member of the community, which has proved to date to be almost a ban on onshore wind. So that's what we were focusing on rather than individual domestic property renewables.
Thank you, Emily. I hope that answers the question. The next question we have is about the it's more of a procedural question about filling out the consultation. This person is asking whether your responses will be saved as you go when you're filling it in online.
That's a really good question. So they won't be saved as you go. However, you can save it periodically there is a function to save it so that you can go back to it later. So I would advise that if you're concerned about your internet connection, if you have a particularly temperamental internet connection, then perhaps at the end of each page you could save it, and then you will have to access the link to continue it through your email, I'm afraid, but it will have saved it up to that point, and we hope that does overcome some of the problems that some people faced last time.
Oh, thank you. Another question's just come in now saying, how much agreement was there between members of the Assembly, sort of in general?
It's a really interesting question. Generally, there was a lot of common ground, as you can see by the high percentage of support that many of the resolutions and conditions that they set out gained. However, there were some more controversial, divisive items. So you'll see as you go through the consultation document that some elements, particularly around car use and restricting car use, only received 50% or less of support from the Assembly. And so there we can see that there wasn't complete agreement. And I think that in our proposed responses, we've tried to reflect the fact that there wasn't perhaps strong enough support for some of those measures for us to take them forward.
Great, thank you, Emily. Another question's just come into the chat now as well, saying, this person's asking, is there a PDF available with a full list of questions in each survey? So stressing that if they'd like to do an organisational response, would it be possible for them to pass a questionnaire around an organisation so that a committee could maybe fill it out and then submit that as an organisational response?
Okay, that's an interesting question. I don't think we currently have a PDF available of the questionnaire on the website. However, that's probably an amendment that we could make quite soon. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. We can implement that quite soon. I can see Emily noting that down right now. In the meantime, an email address in the chat, and we can email you over a PDF of the questionnaire.
Great, thank you. I think that's all the questions that we've got for now. Is there anything else anybody would like to take the time to ask? I see you've put your email in the chat now. Thank you.
Emily, there was one more question relating to wind.
Okay, yeah.
But I think it's a planning policy question, so I'm not sure we're going to be able to answer it.
Okay. Well, we can take a look at that in more detail and consult those who work in planning, who might be able to give you a more detailed response. But please do get in touch with us. I'll put my email in the chat if you want to ask any questions following the webinar, if anything comes to you later. We are ahead of time, so we'll just give you another moment to have a quick think, but please do have a look at the website, tell us what you think, and I will stress again, you don't have to fill out all sections of the questionnaire online or on the paper version, so feel free to scroll to the bottom of the page and press next to get to the section that you want to comment on. For instance, if you particularly want to comment on building retrofit, there are only sort of 3 or 4 required questions at the beginning just to help us understand who we're managing to reach within the community in terms of engagement, but that is all that is required. Okay, so it doesn't look like there's too many questions, last minute questions coming in. Is that right, Emily?
Yeah, no, I can't see any more in the chat at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time this evening, and please do reach out if you have any further questions, but we really look forward to hearing your response to the consultation, and rest assured that in the meantime we are continuing to implement the Interim Devon Carbon Plan and not resting on our laurels about responding to the climate emergency. Have a good evening, enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you, everyone.